So a new round of sanctions on U.S. businesses and individuals are being imposed by China in response to the U.S. sanctions on Chinese officials in Hong Kong. So those who will be affected, however, by these counter-sanctions include former U.S. Secretary Wilbur Ross, Sophie Richardson, Human Rights Watch's China Director Carolyn Bartholomew, Chair of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commissioner Adam King of the International Republican Institute. But they all have something in common. So joining us to discuss where this back and forth might end is Roger Biles, CEO of Intermed Resources. We had you on, Roger, because you're one of those businesses that do a lot with it, both in China and outside. You've had to deal with it. So I got to ask you on this latest move by the Chinese, I call it kind of Chinese checkers. White House is saying the U.S. will be undeterred by the Chinese response. But I have to say, something that all those people kind of have in common is that those are Republicans, mainly people from the Trump administration, organizations that are known to be more conservative. So did China not realize this lack of regard that each party in America has for each other? In fact, I think the Biden White House should probably send a fruit basket to show their gratitude in this move.
Well, it's obvious, Scotty, and thank you for having me on again. Basically, the Chinese watch our politics more than anyone, and when you see something like this, if you just put it on a screen without saying who did it, you would think that the Biden administration did it themselves, because it doesn't affect the Biden administration. This was throwing a bone to the Biden administration. It sounds like when you hear the word sanctions, wow, that's a big deal, but not in this case coming from our side, because it's exactly what the Biden administration wants. They're trying to cut out as if the Trump administration had never happened, so China just obliged them on this part of it.
This is kind of like a parting gift as you're leaving the door. It's like, oh, by the way, we're going to sanction all those people that did not win last fall, and, you know, good luck to you guys. You know, China introduced this national security law. This is kind of they're justifying it. This was in Hong Kong last year in response to those massive protests that were happening, pro-democracy protests.
Right.
Now, it criminalizes the secession, subversion, and collusion with foreign forces and carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. The first person was just convicted of that just recently and will be going to prison for life. Do you think, however, this will actually deter Hong Kong businesses from working with U.S. companies, especially those that have a history of probably working more with the GOP than the Democratic Party?
I think it will. Actually, I've been talking to folks over there at least a couple of times a week. It's to the point now, you're right, they are convicting the first one, but they have arrested over 200 people who are awaiting trial for this. And just since this week, I've heard from some of the people I've been doing business with for over 20 years that they consider insurrection as waving the American flag. And that is a sad state, especially here in this country. You have so many people kneeling on our flag when everybody else in the free world knows that that flag means freedom. So it's going to deter several businesses from actually going into Hong Kong, and from several companies in Hong Kong from wanting to do business, because sometimes if you're in Hong Kong and you're a manufacturer and you do business with American companies, sometimes you adopt a lot of their policies just to keep manufacturing it. And how do they know that's not going to have them somewhere in jail?
So let's talk about what the past has taught us. Maybe to show, obviously, a preview for the future. Does a law like this, and that they're actually bringing people to conviction with it, show that China is tightening their grips on Hong Kong again, so they don't see another round of protest calling for independence in the future? Well,
I tell you what, I'm really surprised in some sorts about China doing this, because usually they think way in the future. They try to put on what they call a false face to attract businesses. But in this incident, it's almost like they are really taking offense to Hong Kong. I can remember I was actually there when Hong Kong was liberated into China's arms from the British, and President Zhang, I think at the time, said, "We will always be Hong Kong, we will always be a port to international business." And they are literally cutting their throats by putting this law in, which is already in effect.
Right.
And they do not realize how they are just cutting their throat for future business transactions between Americans and other countries.
We will see where this goes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scotty.